like yesterday morning at 8 o'clock, Tom started calling people and said, I am renting a bus to go to James Brown's funeral. Do you want to go? I put my hand over the receiver. I said, Fred, Tom's got a bus and we're all going to go. And he said, yeah, we're going. And that's what all of these people did. They knew they needed to come. And isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I thought
It says
it
something about
says
James
a lot.
Brown.
It does, and how much people really care about him. It was great.
Here at Blackside Storybook, we're going to pick back up with our guest, storyteller tonight, Donald Stone, and we were talking about the beginnings of the movement when we cut off. So why don't you go back into that point and just continue about how change began to occur.
Okay, we were talking about, what things began to happen and develop to change this whole situation of, strict segregation in the South, And we were talking about how it was basically some students at North Carolina who went into the 5 and 10 cent store where you couldn't get a hamburger or anything that you couldn't sit there. You could get something maybe to go, but nothing to eat there. And these students went in and challenged these laws. And the whole situation in the South had gotten to a point, where there were similar students that felt the same way that these students felt. And the sit-in movement developed, all across the South. It was just like wildfire, You would pick up the paper, the students in Nashville, Tennessee would pick up the paper and read what was happening in North Carolina, and they would say, let's go, and same thing here in Atlanta, Georgia, that the students would pick up the paper and see what was happening in Nashville and North Carolina, and they would say, let's go sit in and do that kind of thing, So.
You have a question, Angela? Go ahead.
The students that
Loud.
in the South were all of them black.
They were all black. They were all the ones who first challenged these laws. Obviously, they were all black because that was who was affected by it, So they began to just come out of the colleges, the high schools, everywhere, And if you will, I guess this was the period, and we're talking about in the 1960s now. We're talking about, say, 1960, from a period up until around 1966. And here in Atlanta, I think there were not only the sit-ins, but there were the kneel-ins, We said, well, let's attack this situation right in the, where these so supposedly religious people, let's try to go to some of their churches and see what happens, And we had a kneel-in, and we went to the Lutheran church, went to the Baptist church, the Congregationalist church, and without exception, we were thrown out of all of these churches, Say, we can't worship with you. And I can remember very vividly a statement that one of the members of the church said to me, as we tried to integrate that church. He said that, look, I don't appreciate you people coming here and interposing yourself between me and my God. In other words, he still had the same kind of racist mentality that didn't see blacks as people and human beings, that we weren't supposed to have a God or anything, or we didn't worship, So those were the kinds of situations that we were confronted with. There were wade-ins, you couldn't go to public beaches, so there were the wade-ins, in order to be able, so all these kinds of struggles were struggles that all classes and kinds of black people involved themselves in, They would get on the buses, and sit where they wanted to sit, and then we would just challenge these laws.
Do you feel that many of the people who took part in the movement and part of the struggle for justice were young children who, we don't hear about that too much in terms of the role that children played in the struggle?
I know in many instances, say like in Birmingham, Alabama, particularly in Birmingham, there was a lot of the school-age children your ages who were involved in this struggle. Here in Atlanta, I remember there were a few high school students, and they were some of the most vigorous vigorous protesters. You know, they would, you know, wherever a demonstration was going on, they wanted to be there. They wanted to be a part of making history. You know, and that's what they were doing. They were making history, and they were doing it, you know, in a way, you know, that you don't have to do that now. I mean, these people who were your parents, your sisters, maybe your older sisters, aunts, uncles, these people were challenged in these laws, and they say, well, look, if I do this, that means that my children after me are not going to have to do this, you know, so that they were laying their lives on the line for the total betterment of black people all over the country, and the South in particular.
This has some positive effects. Anybody have a question? Okay. You did? One of the things that it did have is its impact, the strength of the children in this country, and the role that men, women, and young people played may have had an impact on the world, I think, to some extent. Do you see any of that?
Oh, absolutely. I think that that you can look, or we can look at that period in history and see that by the development of this student movement, some people call it the modern black liberation struggle, some people call it the human rights struggle, some people call it the civil rights movement, but it was very broad and it touched everybody, because you could see the development out of this student movement. You saw the development of the women's movement.
Right.
You had the development of the other national movements, of the Chicanos, the Asian Americans. All of these kinds of movement developed on the shoulders of this civil rights movement, what was going on with these youth, you know, and it was a very dangerous time to be alive, because a lot of black youth and black men and women lost their lives during this, struggling against to try to change these laws, so that one can, you know, really look at that particular period, you know, and I mean, it's history now, you know, but if you were part of it, you know, then it was a very exciting period to be alive, a very dangerous period, but also very exciting, you know. And like I say, my involvement, I was, along with Faye and a lot of the other people in Atlanta, was involved in this, going in and sitting in, you know, getting ketchup, you know, and salt and pepper poured on you as you were sitting at the lunch counters, you know, being insulted. You know, later on we developed the anti-draft, the anti-war movement. This was another movement that developed out of the black liberation movement during that particular period, you know. And it was in a demonstration in front of the Atlanta Draft Board, you know. And if you ever been down Ponce de Leon, there's a Sears Roebuck there that sits there on Ponce de Leon. Well, right next to that Sears Roebuck used to be the Army Induction Center. And one morning we went down and we demonstrated in there, because we didn't think that black people ought to be going to Vietnam to fight, you know, when they weren't really free here.
Right.
So we were trying to discourage black people from going, the black soldiers from going to Vietnam, to say, hey, stay here. There's a fight going on here that you need to be involved in. And
You spent some time in jail as a result of your demonstration, 3 years?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that did happen, you know. We, as a result of that demonstration, about 13 of us were arrested. There were young men and young women who were arrested and spent time in jail for protesting. The war in Vietnam. Are there any questions? I would like to, you know, what are you thinking about in terms of this? Are you glad to be living now and not living during that particular period? If you were living then, do you think you would have been a part of that movement? I'm sure you would have.
You do. All right.
Great. So it was something that touched all, you know, facets of your black life, you know, because there was so much going on.
We're going to be winding down, but I'd just like to add in that struggle for justice still goes on, and there are things that people can be doing, because all problems are not solved. All things that happen in history didn't just happen in a historical period, but are continuing on, and a lot of people suffer from those. We have about a minute. Can you sum up something in reference to
one of
those
facets? I think the main thing that we're trying to understand, as Faye said, that those were some of the real hard problems that black people were faced during that particular time. We are still faced with problems. Yes?
Why did you have to go
Well, because the society couldn't stand to see people protesting the war. You know, it had
They didn't
to
even
take
call it a
people-
war at that time.
No, they had to take people off the street who had the gumption to do that. Yes,
Did you get in trouble when they called police on you?
a lot of times, yeah.
Lots of times.
Lots of times.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of times in a lot of jails.
Okay, real quick.
Why didn't they want you to eat in?
Why didn't they want you to eat in restaurants?
Because that's the way the society had developed from slavery, you know what I mean? That these ideas that whites were better than blacks, you know, had developed, you know, so that they didn't want you eating with them because they thought they were better than you.
Okay, we're going to be back in a few minutes. Take a quick break, so don't go away. All right.
Where you meet at?
He said, oh shit.
At a party or grocery store, MySpace, which one?
Well, I want to be running number one easy when they march all around his door.
You had a question?
When you all were picketing in the streets, why did they put water on y'all from fire hydrants?
That was to try to, you know, those
Intimidate.
things have a lot of force and they'll knock you down, you know. So that was to try to stop the movement, you know, to stop the people from marching and to stop them from coming on. But black people just kept coming on. The fire hoses couldn't stop them.
Okay. We thank Donald Stone for being with us this evening. He's a brother in struggle, brother for justice. And we're welcoming back at another Blackside Storybook in the near future. And I thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you. I'm Faye Bellamy, and this has been Blackside Storybook.
Hello, big man. Come on, let's go.